Guys, please do subscribe to our channel and support us. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer this honestly. What's one sentence from your childhood that you still remember today? Not something happy, something that stayed with you longer than it should have. Maybe it was said in anger. Maybe it was said casually. Maybe the person who said it doesn't even remember it anymore. But you do, because words don't just disappear, especially when they come from the people who were supposed to make you feel safe. We grow up believing that parents are our protectors, the ones who guide us, support us, teach us who we are. But what happens when the same voice that's supposed to build you up is the one quietly tearing you down? What happens when love comes mixed with hurt? Because here's the truth we don't talk about enough. Not all wounds are visible. Some of the deepest ones are spoken, and they don't just hurt in the moment. They shape the way you see yourself, the way you trust others, the way you move through the world. And sometimes, you don't even realize it's happening. You just grow up thinking, this is normal. But it's not. Today, we're going to talk about something difficult, but incredibly important. The subtle, everyday phrases that toxic parents use, and how those words can follow a child for years, even decades. Because sometimes, it's not what was done to you. It's what was said to you over and over again. Let's start with something that might seem small, but cuts deeper than most people realize. Comments about appearance. You hear things like, "Why do you look like that? You've gained weight. You're too skinny. Why can't you look like other kids?" And maybe it's said like a joke. Maybe it's brushed off as just being honest. But when you're a child, you don't hear it as feedback. You hear it as truth. You start looking in the mirror differently. You start noticing flaws you never saw before. And slowly, your reflection becomes something you judge, instead of something you accept. That's how insecurity begins. Not from strangers, but from the voices you trusted the most. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. The kind of words that don't sound harsh at first, but slowly change how a child sees themselves. Questions that make you feel wrong. Why are you like this? Why do you act so weird? Why can't you be normal? Think about what that does to a child. It doesn't just question behavior. It questions identity. It makes them feel like who they are is something that needs to be fixed. So they start adjusting, changing, hiding, second-guessing everything they do. Not because they want to, but because they're trying to be accepted. And that pattern, it doesn't just disappear when they grow up. It follows them into friendships, into relationships, into every room they walk into. Now here's something that's even harder to hear. Some parents don't just criticize, they reject. They say things like, "I wish you were different. You're not the child I wanted. I regret having you." And if you've ever heard something like that, you know exactly how it feels. It's not just pain, it's confusion. Because how do you process being unwanted by the people who are supposed to want you the most? It plants a dangerous thought in your mind. Maybe I shouldn't be here. And that thought, it can stay for years, even when everything on the outside looks fine. Now let's talk about another phrase that quietly breaks a child from the inside, making them feel like a burden. You're too much to handle. You stress me out. Everything is harder because of you. At first, it might just feel like guilt, but over time, it becomes something else. Silence. The child stops asking for help, stops expressing emotions, stops sharing problems, because they don't want to be too much. They learn to carry everything alone. And when that child becomes an adult, they don't suddenly unlearn that. They struggle to open up. They struggle to ask for support. They feel like their needs are inconvenient. And that silence, it doesn't just stay in childhood. It grows. Because when you spend years believing your needs are too much, you eventually stop believing you deserve to be heard at all. Now let's talk about something that quietly damages a child's sense of worth. Comparison. Why can't you be like your brother? Look at other kids. They're doing so much better than you. Why are you always behind? At first, it might sound like motivation, but it's not. Because comparison doesn't inspire growth. It creates doubt. It makes a child feel like they're constantly falling short, no matter how hard they try. And worse, it teaches them that love is conditional, that they have to become someone else just to be enough. Over time, this creates a constant internal pressure. Always proving, always performing, always chasing approval that never fully comes. And even as adults, they keep comparing themselves to friends, to co-workers, to strangers online, because that voice never really left. Now here's something even more direct, and often more damaging. Labels. You're lazy. You're stupid. You're useless. You'll never succeed. These aren't just insults. They're identities. Because when a child hears something often enough, they don't just remember it. They start believing it. And once a belief is formed, it shapes behavior. A child who's told they're not smart may stop trying. A child who's called lazy may stop believing effort matters. Not because they can't do better, but because they don't see the point. After all, why fight a label that feels permanent? And that's how words become self-fulfilling. Now let's talk about fear. Specifically, the fear of being abandoned. Some parents say things like, "I'll leave you. I'll disappear if you don't behave. You won't find me when you wake up." And even if it's said in frustration, to a child, it feels real. Because children don't understand exaggeration the way adults do. They understand loss. They understand fear. And when the person they depend on most threatens to leave, it creates something deep inside them. A constant anxiety. What if they go? What if I'm not enough to make them stay? And that fear doesn't just go away with age. It follows them into relationships where they overthink everything, where they fear being left, where they struggle to trust love, even when it's real. Now here's a quieter form of damage that often gets overlooked. Broken promises. If you do this, I'll take you there. I promise we'll spend time together. Next time, I won't forget. But then, next time never comes. And to an adult, it might seem small. But to a child, a promise is everything. It's trust. It's hope. It's something they hold on to. So when it's broken, repeatedly, they don't just feel disappointed. They feel betrayed. And slowly, they learn something dangerous. People don't mean what they say. And that belief? It can make it incredibly hard to trust anyone later in life. Even the people who genuinely care. Now let's pause for a second. Because if you're listening to this, you might be recognizing some of these patterns. Maybe in your childhood. Maybe in someone you know. And if that's the case, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to you was not your fault. You were a child. You were learning. You were trying to understand the world through the words of the people closest to you. And if those words hurt you, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But here's the part that matters most. Awareness changes everything. Because once you recognize those patterns, you can start separating them from your identity. You can question the beliefs that were placed on you. You can begin to rebuild the way you see yourself. Not based on what was said to you, but based on who you truly are. And if you're a parent, or someone who plans to be one someday, this matters even more. Because your words, they don't just pass through your child. They stay. They echo. They become part of how your child speaks to themselves, long after you're not in the room. So choose them carefully. Because one sentence can either build a person or quietly break them. Now let me ask you again. What's one sentence from your childhood that you still remember? And more importantly, what's one sentence you wish you had heard instead? Maybe something like, "I'm proud of you. You're enough. I'm here for you. I love you no matter what." Because sometimes, healing doesn't start with forgetting the past. It starts with replacing the voice that hurt you with one that finally supports you. If this video made you feel seen, understood, or even a little less alone, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're comfortable, tell me in the comments, what's something you wish someone had told you growing up? You never know who might need to hear it today. Thanks for watching.